Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. Today, we're talking about your first 100 days. It is a term you have probably heard before as it relates to a president, to a new president. We have always or often judged our presidents within what they can based on what they can do within the first 100 days. It is a term that was originally coined in 1932 by FDR, the president known to enact more legislation and develop more federal agencies in his first 100 days than any other president thereafter. We all know we are 1 week away from resetting that timer, and our new president has 100 days to show us what he can do. But why is this important to Coffee Time with Masterminds? Well, last two shows, we talked about goal setting for the new year. We talked about last week a framework you can use for productivity and maximizing that. And now we're talking about new leaders. And what is it like to come into an organization, begin leading, and letting your staff know and your board know that you are the right person. But it doesn't only apply to nonprofit leaders. If you are a business person and you have a new client, the first 100 days sets the tone for the rest of your time there. So we're going to be talking today about what that means. And we have a guest, Amy Casavina Hall, is going to share with us her experiences as a new leader and what the first 100 days was like for her. So if you have joined us, please tell us your name and where you're from, because we always like to hear where our listeners are coming from. And welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds, a 30-minute show where we talk about issues for nonprofit leaders. And we do that with two other co-hosts. My name is Cynthia Rojas, and I am founder and principal of To Your Growth. I am going to bring up Rebecca Tuttle. Hi, Rebecca. How are you?
Good morning. I was just typing. Myra's with us this morning, so I was just typing. Hi, Myra.
Hi, Myra. How are you?
I'm Rebecca Tuttle. I'm the founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
Awesome. And let's bring Peter on. Hi, Peter.
Good morning. How are you?
I'm
Hi,
good.
Peter.
I'm good.
I am Peter Blakely, and I am the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Cool. Thank you so much. Today we have a guest, Amy Casavina Hall. I am bringing her on. How are you, Amy?
Good morning. I'm great, Cynthia. So good to see you.
Same here, same here. Amy's spent 20 years in the nonprofit sector, really dedicated to systems change for social justice. She has been on the funder side, on the leadership side, and really comes with a comprehensive view of what nonprofits need, what leaders need, and she's here to help talk through this conversation about being a leader for not the first time, for a new organization and what that looks like. So welcome. All right, let's get started. Why are the first 100 days important? Anybody want to start us off?
You brought me to talk about it, so I'll start us off. Right? I mean, any leadership change is a transformational moment for an organization, right? No matter what came before, whether it was a change based on, quite frankly, some really negative things happening, or if it was a change where you're handing it off from the most inspired leader kind of on an issue that the organization's ever had, it's a pivotal moment. It's a pivotal moment for the mission. It's a pivotal moment for how the organization operates. And it's certainly a really big moment for staff, right?
Yeah.
It's everyone's day-to-day life. This is what drives them. This is what they do. And so when a new leader walks in the door, everything could be up in the air, right?
Yeah.
And so walking in understanding that is really important.
But there are schools of thought. Is that me?
We're getting an echo.
Yep. Okay. I'm going to keep talking. Yep, I'll keep talking. So there are schools of thought that the first 100 days, a new leader should actually lay low and listen and watch the dynamics. And what you said, Amy, is really powerful. You're talking about looking at it from a transformational opportunity. and not one where you sit back and not ruffle the feathers because you don't want to do it, but actually strategically look at how you can make change. Is that what you're?
Yeah, I think for me, the priorities in the first 100 days are building trust in relationships, right?
Mm,
I mean, that is absolutely critical to the greatest degree possible, right? And you have to make that your intention, right?
right.
You have to make it clear that that's what you're there to do. It's setting priorities and really clear priorities and communicating them. Someone
Yeah.
said to me, leadership is all about having priorities and pursuing them, right?
Yeah.
By the end of that 100 days, you want your team, your board, your partners, your stakeholders, you want them to know what your priorities are. And then it's having a plan in place to start executing on those that has been that's been inclusively put together, that is focused on success, that's measurable, all the good things a plan should be,
Right.
right? And
Right.
it needs to be clear, right?
I
People
think
want
that's
to know
really,
where you're
really
going.
important. You know, when there's a leadership change in an organization, there's so much fear and uncertainty, and dragging that out seems unnecessary. So being clear about what the new priorities are going to be probably reduces stress.
I think absolutely. I mean, there's always some things that are obvious that need to be changed that are non-negotiable, right? You might stumble into things that say like, no, I'm not comfortable with that. We can't do that the way. Doesn't meet good practice. Doesn't meet best practice. That has to change, and you're going to communicate that. But there's so many other things. Maybe you can say, hey, we're going to hold steady here as we focus on these other things, right? The most important thing for our organization is I've gathered this information, I've talked to people, right? I've done a really good diagnosis and assessment, is we're going to focus here. And then, knowing where you're going, that takes so much of the stress down. And
Yeah.
then you're accountable for it, right? If it is the priority, you should be doing it, and it holds yourself accountable. And then all those people you're working with, they know what train they're on, right?
Yeah.
Important.
One of the things, sorry, go ahead, Cynthia.
Well, no, I was going to ask you. We can use this in our business. I think the first 100 days or whatever, however long your consulting project is, taking the first third of that or the first 25%, the first quarter, to really come in strong and setting the tone, setting goals is just like Amy said, listening. I see this being used by many people, and I wanted to know if you could talk about how you start your consulting partnerships.
Yeah, one of my initiatives for this year is actually to move through projects a lot faster by building a lot of activity into the first end, for a lot of the reasons that Amy is talking about. You've got a certain amount of attention, you've got a certain amount of momentum around the issue, and the more clarity you can provide way up front about what's going to happen and why this project is important and who's going to be involved and how great it's going to be when you're done, the better. So my goal is actually to move through most projects within 100 days and fully maximize those effects.
Yeah. How about you, Rebecca? Do you
I'm looking at the comments here.
No, we're getting a lot of comments.
Yeah. So, I think a first 100 days is great because you need a starting point. A lot of times when we lack the motivation is because we don't know where to start and we don't set ourselves up with a starting point. So today's day one of 100 days of grant writing. So let's do this.
That's fantastic.
That's a way to get it done. I like that.
Yeah.
Was it you, Rebecca, who was talking about organizations delaying and saying we're not quite ready, and that you were saying, let's just do it now, get ahead of the curve?
Yeah.
So how do you get people to get started, Amy? Like, especially for the ones that are like, oh, I'll do that in 10 days from now, or next month I'll start my 100 days. What do you tell them? How do you get them geared up for it?
Well, I mean, that's your job as a leader, right? It's not to have all the answers to all the questions. It's not to know how everything should work, right? It's just to gather that information, to understand where you're strong and grow your strengths, right? And to understand where you're weak and where you need to, put energy up against that. But to get people motivated to get it done, right? Like that's what you're there to do. And it's creating pathways for that. So it's not so overwhelming. And that's the beauty of a short time frame. Right? I kind of think you can get anyone to do anything for 30 days, right?
Yes.
If you're like, if you bring, right? I mean, the most resistant person who just thinks you are absolutely wrong about what you're proposing. It is the worst idea ever. If you go to them and say, I just want you to try this for 30 days.
Yeah.
Try it for 30 days. Let's figure out how we're going to assess it being successful or a complete failure. Let's build on that time right now to revisit it. Let's know we're going to come back to it. You're not wedded for life. You're not signing in blood. 30 days. Can we do this for 30 days? You can get people to do just about anything under those circumstances.
As I like to say, you don't have to buy it. Just rent it for 30 days.
Right? You're not committed for the rest of your life.
And I appreciate how you're talking about building assessment in. You know, that's one of the things that I talk about all the time. Like, let's not start an initiative if we haven't already decided how we're going to measure whether or not it was successful.
I think we have a lot in common.
After this, we're going to go start a band together.
Right.
I want to touch on some of the comments if we could.
Yeah.
Now, Myra's might cover us all, so I'm just going to read it. It says the first 100 days will determine relationships and building a rapport with everyone. This is the leader's opportunity to establish priorities and expectations. That's so true. These days will determine what will work, what will not work. In addition, it'll also determine if the leader even wants to be a leader. Ooh, that's a good one. More importantly, to be honest with that right away. Absolutely. Wow. And then Michael, we'll show Michael's comment here. Michael says, in sales, the start of a new journey is very important. Sales execs get off to a great start in the first quarter to show the best results by the end of the year. That's absolutely right.
Yeah, and that kind of momentum just builds on itself, right?
Oh yeah. And it's all related. The 12-week year, the first 100 days. It's all relative. But you know, other things that have been noted why it's important is because people like you with the first 100 days.
Yeah, you've got a honeymoon, right?
Yeah.
And they like you. Everybody's excited and happy.
Yep. Absolutely. And this is why this is why the first 100 days can determine whether a president is going to be successful, is because if you can't get things passed when people are still liking you and you are your most popular,
right?
Your next 3 years and 200 days are going to be tough. They're going to be tough.
That whole idea of like start how you want to end, right. I think is so important.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things that goes through my mind, good mentors, good colleagues, start how you want to end. And I think in that first 100 days, I mean, as a leader, you have to be comfortable being curious, being honest about what you don't know, what you don't understand, and really engaging people into that. Because if you kind of hide under the blanket of the pieces of the position you don't know as well, I mean, no one's going to know brilliantly, or few people, all the aspects it takes to run an organization, any organization, but a nonprofit. And so if you can show from the beginning, you want to learn from your people, like they're the experts. You're going to have curiosity about their work. You're going to ask lots of questions. You're going to ask hard questions. You're going to ask some easy questions. And that if you don't understand something, that you've got the strength or the comfort level to say, I'm just not getting it, right? I'm not getting it. And it's really important for me to understand this. Your work is really important. And so let's figure out how we get more clear. Let's set up some time to talk about this specifically, because I really value this. So I think you want to start with that, like, I'm a curious person. I care about your work. It's important. What you do is incredibly important. And that's true of anyone in an organization. I've also found that if after that, if it can't be clearly explained to me, right? I'm not a genius and I'm not a dummy, but if someone can't clearly explain to me something after we really poked at it, then my alarm my buzzer is probably going off at that point, right? Mm-hmm. So I don't have to be an expert in accounting, which God knows I'm not, to say, if someone can't really tell me how we reconcile things or how we track our unrestricted funding, right? We can't pull it apart. My my buzzer's going off. Someone
Yeah.
can't.
You have that license when you're new to ask a lot of questions and sort of use your naivete to dig in ways that might be uncomfortable at other times.
But I want that window open the whole time I'm there, right? So I want to crack it open from the beginning and make sure there's nothing sacrosanct, right? That like working together means engaging in a really authentic way around hard issues and diving in deep. Because, some issues are easy, you don't need to do that. Other things take that attention. And knowing that that's the expectation. Me asking you a question that like, why do we do it this way? It's not a threat. It's not an accusation. It's not a reflection on your performance. It's me wanting to understand, why do we do it this way? And like, that's good, right? Like, together.
But Amy, you might get some pushback there to say, why are you questioning things? I love that we're talking about this because when there's change in nonprofits, which Cynthia reminds us is hard, comes with loss, comes with grief, and we're trying to make this change for the better, and people say, well, that's not the way we've always done things, and give that pushback, and then the leader says, well, why are you questioning things? It reassures people that they should be questioning things if it feels like they should be questioning things. And then it's all part of the process.
Yeah.
That was my aha moment just now. From some of our episodes, This is a great conversation today.
Rebecca, I'm seeing the comments come in. Is there anything to share or?
Some of them I can't pull up, so I'm wondering if they're coming in through LinkedIn. So if you see them there, if you want to pull them, go ahead.
You got it. Thanks. So the flip side of the 100 days is that you are in a fishbowl and people are watching you. And in nonprofits, that's your staff, that's your board, that's the clients you're serving, the community. And what are some things that you've learned leaders should not do in their first 100 days that you are like, you should have rethought that one?
Don't hide yourself away in a hole. Hide yourself away in a hole, right? Be present. Be in meetings that you normally wouldn't be at. Invite people to your table who normally wouldn't be there. Bring people together against a different kind of strata in the organization. And there almost always is one, right? There's always who's at the CEO or executive director's table and who's not. How do you break that down?
Yeah.
How do you show up where people might not expect to see you? Not in a gotcha way, and really clear about that. Right. Hey guys, I want to understand us better and you better and how we work. So I'm going to be around, right? And if you prefer I'd schedule that, like that's great. But if you see me popping in and roaming around, this is not a gotcha moment. This is for me to learn. So thank you for accommodating me, right? I appreciate that. Thank you for welcoming me in. And if there are places I can't be, like let's figure that out up front. But this is about my learning journey, and thank you for being part of that, right? Because people want that notice. And you definitely don't want it to feel like a gotcha thing. But being present is so important, which in a digital world now is a very big challenge, right? So you have to find out different ways how to do that. I still think it's essential.
Thaddeus has a really great question in the comments that relates to that.
Yeah, he says, during these 3 pandemics are areas that you should think about differently during the first 100 days, especially since things are changing daily that you have no control of. So he's asking a question, are there areas you think about differently during the first 100 days?
I mean, I think I would heighten all your good knowledge, right? So, they always say like over communicate, right? Like let people know changes are happening, things are happening quickly. I get that, I'm with you, right? I'm going to send out something by the end of every week to recap kind of what's going on, what we're learning, what's changing. And here are the forums for us to discuss that or get more information or go deeper. Here's when you should go to your supervisor. And if it's something you're not comfortable with, here's another way to get that information up. So I would communicate to the hilt in that moment. So people know where you are, where you're focused, what's going on, and how they can plug into that and that information or express what they might need to express, which sometimes is positive and like that would be great, but oftentimes it's challenges, right?
Yeah.
You need to hear them. You need to hear
So
them.
what's a good lead-in sentence? Because some people aren't so touchy-feely with, I really feel like you're doing this, or you know what I mean? So some people are, I'm not, or that's making me feel like this. For those who aren't comfortable with that kind of dialogue, what's a good lead-in just to get the conversation going? Because I imagine this must be difficult to just kick it off, right?
So it's funny. I'm not a touchy feely. I know that about myself, and I always make sure I'm surrounded by someone who is. Right? That's one of my career lessons learned. Have that empath right next to me. That probably is my number 2 because I need them. I
call that person my interpreter.
Right?
I'm very well-minded. I can follow the meeting, but I can't follow the stuff that's going on in the meeting. And so I have somebody else to check in with after.
I mean, I think that's great, right? And like, it's a hard lesson. You learn that lesson a hard way. A hard way.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I know who I am, right? I'm focused on results. I'm focused on getting things done. I'm focused on process to get there. To me, that works, but that doesn't mean that works for everyone else. And they aren't feeling.
I don't know why.
Right? All the time. And there are people who get really frustrated with the touchy-feely too, right? And so I don't think I'm one of those, but like you have to find that balance, right? So again, going back to priorities, and at a time like now, those priorities might be changing super quick, right? You might not be setting 90-day priorities. You might be setting, by the end of this week, we need to figure out how to test out this vaccine. What's a vaccination plan, right? How to set up space completely differently. I mean, okay, let's make those really clear. Let's let everyone know what we're working on. What is the priority at this point in time? What progress up against it looks like. And if things are going to shift, you're going to have to acknowledge that too, right? If things don't go as planned, you're going to have to share that also, obviously. But keep it front and center. Keep it front and center. Keep it in front of people. And bring, don't just hear from the same voices, right? Make sure as you're figuring these things out, you're changing space, you're figuring out how to vaccinate folks, something like that. You really want to be talking to people at all different places and levels in your organization. What are the barriers? What do people need? How do we make this work? What am I not thinking of? Because you're not going to think of it all. You're definitely
and not in a gotcha way. When you say like, let's assess it. If it didn't work out, let's know that too. Not because we're bad people or it's a failure, but just so we can do it better next week.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
always in the assumption we're all doing it with best intention, with our best effort. Right.
But I think that's the makings of a good team. No one holds all the cards. No one brings all the same skill. No one comes at it from the same place. So that's the making of a good team. And that's why it's so important to get a good leader to tap into each areas of the team.
Yeah. And if you're that type of leader, making that known also, because not everyone starts out that way. And so I think that's important. Peter and Rebecca, what have you seen as mistakes? And Rebecca, you were an ED once, and what are some mistakes you've seen leaders do? I mean, you work with tons of leaders these days. Their first 100 days.
I think coming on too strong in just jumping in, saying they brought me here because I know the way, follow me, instead of listening before you're leading, and then listening and leading at the same time. Because that's initial shock of who's this guy think he is, right? And let's be honest, most of the time it's been who's this guy think he is, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
So, leading and listening and really showing people that you honor their contribution to the organization, because for a lot of folks, especially the ones in the trenches, that's not just a job for them. They're there for a sincere reason, and it's hard work.
Yeah. Peter, what have you seen?
I think one is coming in under-informed. So a leader didn't have all the information before they stepped in, and then when they did get more complete information, they actually had to pivot, and I think they lost the momentum of their first 100 days because it turned out to be about something very different. from what they initially thought their priorities were going to be.
Yeah, so some of these concepts, or there is a book that I read many years ago. I think it was the first time I had become a leader. Someone had recommended it for me. It's called Hit the Ground Running, and so it's a little older by Liz Cornish, and but it still rings true today. And she said something that you just mentioned, Peter. She says, "Do your homework about the organization." You shouldn't go in trying to get information one that you could have gotten on Google, right? Use your 100 days to dig deeper, right? So it's great. I mean, your first 100 days, you get to say, oh, I didn't know that, right? But that gets old eventually.
Yeah.
People admire a leader that has already come in with that information, right? And is able to hit the ground running from that point on. That's the name of her book.
And that also has to do with the onboarding process.
Yeah.
You know, if the board or whoever is onboarding this leader hasn't provided all of the information, then that might be a red flag to you coming in, right?
Yeah. Well, I do think this is where nonprofits have kind of different space from other places, right? Mm-hmm. So normally you're getting hired by a board, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, assuming you're coming in as an ED or something like
pretty
that. Yeah.
Removed from operations and day to day. And they tend to often only know maybe what they've heard from the previous ED, right? Some boards have deeper penetration, but like in general, that can be a very kind of single line back and forth. Executive director, CEO to board, right? And, you know, often they bring staff in for the hiring process, but really it's the board. And I think that disconnect between a board sense of priorities or operational goals, what you should focus on 100 days, and when you hit the ground, what you might find, I think that can be pretty big sometimes.
Yeah.
In the third sector interim executive director, they say you spend the first 30 days doing a diagnosis. You pull together a cross-sectional group of people. You know, there's so many tools you can use. You pick your favorite tools, but you focus on, you focus on development, you focus on your programming, you focus on your human capital, you focus on your financial health and well-being, your governance, right? And then develop your 90-day plan. Because often that gap between what you're thinking you're walking into and what is there can be pretty big. Now, every organization is different, right? But I think that is so many different ways to approach it. But there's something to that. Really recognizing that what you hear heading in might be a different situation on the ground, just by the nature of how we're structured.
Yeah.
It's a funky structure.
Yes.
So what do you do at the end of your 100 days? I know we're coming to the end of our episode. So what do you do at the end of your 100 days?
That was a great
Celebrate people's contributions, celebrate their successes, acknowledge what was hard and what you learned, where there's more to do, celebrate what you accomplished, and launch the next one.
Well, I was going to say, start again. Keep that as a regular, an ongoing best practice. I love it.
It might be a little more discreet. It might not be like, here's our next 100-day plan,
right.
But that's what you're doing.
Yeah. So, the book I referenced, Hit the Ground Running, she talks about three things. Pre-plan, so pre-plan going in and do your homework about the organization. You shouldn't be surprised. And I have to say, I work with leaders who are also transitioning, and a lot of times we're not digging deep enough in the organization, and we walk in and we're surprised by things. So like things like 990s are public information. You can look up press releases and things of that nature to understand the organization better. And so she talks about doing that. Prepare, right? So prepare yourself, know your strengths. Amy talked about this. Know your strengths so that you can leverage them to have optimum output. Don't do something you're not strong in because everybody's watching you. And then listen. To me, the worst thing a new leader can do is come to a meeting and spend 20 minutes talking about what they used to do at their former organization. Don't do that. Please don't do that, new leaders. Listen, every organization has a history, and many times that history is beautiful. Somebody started that organization for a reason. And so listen to the way they do things. So remember, pre-plan, prepare, and listen. So as Rebecca said, we have come to the end, but I'm going to go around and see what's your takeaway for today's show. So I'll start with Rebecca because she's on my left. Rebecca, what's your big takeaway from today's show?
Well, as I always say, it's kind of my tagline. I'm grant right now. There's never been a better time to get started in grant writing. So make today your first 100 days, right?
Yeah, you can start anytime. Peter, how about you?
Yeah, that's true. I think mine is, once again, building assessment into every process and every plan, and the importance of being able to bring finding and observations and data in a way that is not a gotcha, that's just a learning opportunity for everyone in the organization is so crucial.
Yeah. One of the things that strikes me is this concept of be intentional, right? Have a plan, be intentional. People will respect you for that, and they deserve a leader that's intentional and takes their work seriously. All right, Amy, take us home. What's something you want to offer nonprofit leaders when thinking about their first 100 days?
I would say that it is a lonely position. If you're coming in the leadership of an organization and you haven't done it before, it is a lonely position. And I think that is one of the biggest shocks in holding that role, right? Yeah. Even when you're surrounded by great people, there are always things that you cannot share for a variety of reasons. And I mean, what I've taken away from this is, God, there's so many great people doing this work, passionate and brilliant people. Build your support network, have it in place. You're going to need it and use it.
Yes.
Use it so you're not isolated. So you've got a forum to work with. And you've got that kind of strength. You've got that wind in your sails. So it's a different role. So
Liz, yeah, that's so important. Liz Cornish dedicates an entire chapter to building a support system. So you're right on. All right, everybody, we are done. We thank you for joining us at Coffee Time with Masterminds, and we'll see you next week. Same time, same place. Thank you so much. Bye, everyone.
Bye.
Thank you.